Welcome to the Millennial Diner podcast, where we're here to talk everything emo, punk, and coffee. Um, I am here. My name is Jeff, and I'm here with my buddy Phil. Say hi, Phil.
Hello, everybody.
And we are at the Millennial Diner, which is a fictitious diner in our minds, where we get to relive the days where we used to hang out in diners and talk about our favorite punk and emo music. And that's what we're gonna be doing here. So, since we're at a diner, Phil, I think we should start with our order of the day, don't you think?
That is a great idea. What are you ordering today?
Well, today I'm gonna have a tofu scramble, with a side of sourdough toast with smashed avocado on top of it.
Tempting.
Little avocado toast, and I'm very excited about it. We'll probably put some hot sauce on there too. Oh, and obviously a cup of coffee.
Obviously, that sounds very tempting. That sounds very tempting. I think today I'm gonna go with rye toast with a little bit of butter and
Ooh,
black coffee. I think that's a little bit of butter. A little bit of butter.
just a little bit of butter.
Not a lot. No, I don't like toast. I don't like. I like toast with butter, not butter with toast. You know what I mean?
I understand. How do you feel about the little packets of jam?
No jam.
No jam.
No
No
jam.
jam. Mm,
No, I'm not a jam kind of guy. I don't sit back and think of jam.
really?
Yeah. Do
You're never
you?
just well. You know what's funny? I used to be a jam guy, big jam man. You know, a jammer. You know, I liked NBA jam and I liked
The
strawberry
NBA jam,
jam.
that was good. Strawberry, no, but I've never been a jam on bread kind of Well, just jam in general. I don't. I know. I mean, I know people who will eat jam. I don't even.
Well,
No.
that's strange to me. They're just eating jam from a jar, but hey, everyone has their own thing, right? What they
You know.
like. But
Well, that's what makes us great. This is an inclusive show. We care about people who eat jam straight from jars.
yes, but I actually don't do that anymore. I went to jam, I went to preserves because
Oh,
I like the chunks of fruit in there. I wanted to feel like, oh, this is great. And then one day I was like, why am I even wasting time with fructose syrup at all when I can just put blueberries and blackberries right on my toast?
that's iterative. That's iteration. I like that. You learn something, you try. You're like, no, let me try something else. I'm gonna go do that. I like. Yeah, why not?
Look,
You're
I
just
was a,
simplifying it.
yeah, I was a Skippy peanut butter,
Mm.
strawberry preserves kid, and I'm a adult with natural peanut butter and berries on top of some kind of bread product. So that's where I'm
Now,
at.
now I kind of want a peanut butter sandwich. I gotta be honest. No jam though.
No, not even going with the jam. Well,
No,
speaking of jams, Phil,
right.
we're here to speak about our favorite kind of jams.
Not
Uh,
strawberry, not strawberry preserves. We're talking about our jams, our favorite songs, our favorite albums, our favorite bands. Let's talk about that.
right. So yeah. So why don't we set the stage here? We are
Yep.
calling this episode zero. I got the idea from Marvel and DC Comics in the late '90s when they decided to make zero issues for all their comics because Image did it too. I think they all did it. It was a trend. It was a trend. You've had 30 years of these comics, and they're like 40 years of these comics, and they're like, you know what? Why don't we do an issue zero and we do whatever we want before it started? So this is our issue zero. Um,
It's much better than the foil cover. That was a big thing back then too. Like everybody had the foil cover and like 5 versions of it. So let's just go with episode 0 before the start.
but
Let's do that.
I am wrapped in foil.
It's true. Yes, wrapped in
Yeah,
foil.
yeah,
The windows, all
all
the
foil
windows,
around
all
our.
foil. You're lucky I don't have my foil hat on.
All right. Well, so I was saying we're getting to the jams. Let's set the stage first. We are both originally from. Am I allowed to say the truth? We were both from this place called a mystical land called Long Island.
It's true.
We grew up on Long Island, never in Long Island,
Never
on Long
in Long
Island.
Island. You know how often I have to explain that to people? It's never in Long Island. You on Long Island. I don't know why, but
I
that's
don't
the
know.
way it is.
Well, because most people live in a city, like they'll say like I live, but we are literally no, we don't live in this place. We are on top of this island. The island is not very deep. I
No.
believe geologically speaking. I think it's kind of just floating on water there a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and it's not very wide. Well, it's long, hence the name, but not
Right,
wide. We're not called
right.
Wide Island. That'd be very different. We're only like 3 miles wide, as opposed to
Well,
the length of it.
well, we also can just help everybody out and just that we're from Strong Island. That's how we kind of like assert our toughness to the city folk. Let them know that there's nothing long about this. It's all strong.
That's right. That's right. Be prepared to deal with the Strong Island. That's correct.
Exactly. So being from Strong Island, there is a heavy culture of diner culture there. I mean, I think the beauty of Long Island, if there is any, is their diner and pizza place and bagel place situations where the key is it's not like if someone says, "Oh, do you know the great diner in a town or a city?" Someone will have a favorite diner in the town or city.
Right.
They'll be like, "Oh, you should go to Flo's or Moe's or what have you." But the key with Long Island is it doesn't matter which diner you go to, you are getting pretty much the same experience, the same
Right.
kind of food, the same, I don't know, everything, decorum, everything. It's all the same. And that is what makes it special because you could be in any town and have the exact same experience of someone in a different town.
That's great. And you know what? And if you're driving down the road and you're like, I don't really like the look of that particular diner, just keep going. Give it like 30 more feet. You'll find another three.
Exactly. It's everywhere. And it's all you know exactly what you're getting, you know? If you want cheese fries, you can get cheese fries. I know we've sat with people who've had many plates of cheese fries in our day. So
Cheese fries, flapjacks, as our one friend used to call them, buttered toast. That's where I live and all that. Pizza bagels. That's something I miss. Pizza bagels, because just so everybody knows, neither one of us live there anymore.
we
We both
don't, yeah.
left. No,
We're,
neither one of us
we,
live.
we were not strong enough for Strong Island, so
Nope.
we went our own ways. I'm in Los Angeles, California, which I ought to say Long Island traffic prepared me greatly for living here because everyone comes to Los Angeles like, oh, the traffic's terrible. I'm like, this just feels like Long Island.
Just feels like Long Island. Yep. No, and I live up in New Hampshire, which is great because there's no one here. And
Right.
so when I go on the road, I just can zip where I'm going now, which is a benefit because I've learned I can't take traffic anymore. But now and again, I do have to go into Massachusetts and hit some traffic, which is always a lot of fun because then the Long Island me comes back where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I have to start weaving and getting my way through things. So naturally, it's a regression that just magically appears. It's pretty fun.
Well, I'm glad to hear that's still alive within you, and it shows itself at times. It's important to keep that part of you alive, um, even if you are far from, as we call it.
Well, it's
Um,
the root. It's the roots, right? It's just much like with this show. It's remembering your roots from where you came.
right. And we cut our teeth in the punk rock, emo, hardcore scene at a very I guess it was a very rich time of the scene was happening. The scene felt like it was happening all around us. Uh, there were bands who came up around us who became gigantic in the world. Where sometimes I didn't realize that until I like traveled away and I found out like, wow, sure, a lot of people with Taking Back Sunday shirts here in Disneyland in California. What? I thought that was a Long Island band, but no, they are the world's band.
Very much so.
Well, yes. So on that, uh, we much like our generation, many people as we're all getting old now and being nostalgic, there are now festivals like When We Were Young Fest that just happened here in Vegas, which was basically when I saw the lineup, I blacked out, hit my head, came to was like, it can't be real. It can't be all these bands all at once. But it was. But that's also because we are all now adults and we live in a capitalistic society, so we need to buy things and spend money to feel like we're alive. So why not spend money on concert tickets to the bands that we loved 20 years ago?
Why not? Absolutely. It's well, you get to that age, you're like, you know what? I'm going to invest in my youth and go back and buy the stuff that I wish I had at the time. So I'm gonna go see
Exactly.
some concert. I'm gonna see concerts to the bands that I was like, you know what? But then again, we did see some crazy shows where the one that always comes back to me is the night we saw Alkaline Trio
Mhm.
and Alkaline Trio, brand new, Take It Back Sunday. That was all one show,
Yeah,
right?
that was
Yeah,
all one show. And in a ethical, humane society like conference room, right? Like that was the place where the
yeah,
shows were.
right. It was the strangest setup, and I just remember. And looking back on it now, I'm like, wow, that is a. You know how expensive that ticket would be right now for those three bands on one show? My goodness.
Well, I was just thinking like that was probably about a $10 ticket, if that, right?
If that 10, 12, 8,
Maybe,
somewhere
yeah.
around there. Yeah, not a lot. And then now that'd be well over 100 for something like that, I bet. 75? Let's do 75.
It'd be a lot, Phil. I'll say that much. I know Blink 182 tickets recently went on sale for the the return of Tom to the band.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about that many times over the course of this podcast, but
Mhm.
they the tickets had this sliding scale now the Ticketmaster gets to do because they're a monopoly, and for some reason they can pull this move where like if there's a lot of interest in the tickets, they have a sliding price.
Yep.
So within 30 seconds, the $70 Blink-182 tickets were going for at least 500.
Oh.
And while I love Blink-182, even here as an adult, I don't know if I want to spend $500.
There's a line I'm not willing to cross, and I think I think that's it. The $500 for one ticket is absurd. Absurd.
Yeah.
I miss the old days. Old days where it was 10, 12 bucks, 15. Like God forbid, it was like 18 or 20. I'm pretty sure there was a Green Day show at Irving Plaza that would have been about 20, maybe 25. I think that's that show that was with the Living End, if I remember right. I was late to that show. I met you there, and I missed the Living End, and I was pissed because that was I wanted to see the Living End. I didn't get to see them that time. I forget why I was late, but
it was the Roseland Ballroom.
That's what it was. Yes, you're right. Okay, yes.
Yeah. Great show. Great show.
Great show.
Great
Green Day killed it. Great. Yeah, they killed it. So yeah, going back when we were younger, speaking of when we were young, we met high school.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's correct.
I think we kind of knew of each other in middle school, but we really met and was aware and interacted more in high school.
Well, I think it's because we had, and I will wax poetic about this to anybody who will listen. In our high school, we had a beautiful gift of a wonderful art department. Mm-hmm. In particular, in our department, we had a film and video department.
Correct.
It was run by our beloved teacher, Miss Smith, who was the greatest teacher, the coolest teacher, because she just understood that, adolescents, they're out there, they figure themselves out, but she made a very safe place, especially for those who are a little bit more, a little bit more nerdier, not in like the smart chemistry way, but like they liked their comics, they liked, they loved movies, they loved punk music. And then for some reason, that kind of became a clubhouse, as it were.
Yeah. But with Miss Smith, it was funny because she, looking back on it now, it's probably one of the first and few educational, psychologically safe environments I feel like I had. And it was definitely because she created the sense of, like you said, clubhouse, that we're young, but we're trying to figure it out, but then we wanted to do videos, and she would always be supportive of whatever kind of art, we'll call it that, we wanted to do. If it was music, if it was video, if it was painting, and so on and so forth. She created that environment for us. And I think a lot of us thrived in that. And that's where you and I met, where we were working both on the video yearbook at one point, I think of what it was.
Yeah, and that was basically where we would just take out, the video cameras and just go around and get footage of school. And then at the end of the year, we would edit together over fun music.
Just remember, don't get a middle finger on camera because you always failed that day. You got a zero that day if you had it. And then inevitably you'd go out and capture it, and then you'd be like, man, why did you do that? And then you have to go back, rewind it, and then record over it so you didn't get the zero for the day.
Amazing.
I remember it's instant zero, and you were like, shit, why did I just have, man, thanks so much for giving me a zero for the day. I appreciate you.
Well, Phil, I want to make you feel better because this is an audio medium here. So please feel free to give as many middle fingers as you want. No zeros.
Right? No zeros today. I'm very excited about this. Maybe that's that's probably why I spent so much time giving other people the middle finger when I got older, because I was like, I can't do it in the video room. I'd get in trouble.
Right. It's understandable.
Let it fly.
So that's where we met. I think our friendship really blossomed. We both went to different schools right after colleges, right after high school. And then it's kind of like about the time we probably lost touch because we just didn't see each other. Right. You had ended up getting a job at a comic book store in the mall, and I would go to the mall, and because that's what you did on Long Island when we weren't at the diner or at shows, you were at the mall. Mm-hmm. And I ran into you, and you told me you were going to a new school called Hofstra University. And I said, that's funny, I'm going there too. And we'd be kind of like, we're like, great, let's hang out. And by hanging out, it meant let's go to movies and go to shows. That's
right. Well, and it was beneficial because we were both transfer students at that point. It was like, I don't know anybody here. You don't know anybody here either. We know each other though, so let's band together. And through that banding, I guess, is that we like, okay, we both like the same stuff. We're into the same music. We're into the same movies, TV shows, video games, whatever. And that, again, we were like, let's go check out bands. And because Hofstra, if anybody knows, you're 30 minutes away from the city? Like,
Yep.
and for everybody else who doesn't know, the city, well, you're from Long Island. If I reference the city, that means I'm talking about New York City. There is no other city besides New York City.
Well, it's funny, Phil. Like, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but part of the reason why I chose Hofstra was because of the proximity to the city, and mostly to go to shows. Because around, there was just so many shows on Long Island and New City and even New Jersey at the time. And before that, I was in a school upstate New York, and there was nothing around and no one's, for some reason, I was just like not around the kids who like that stuff anymore. Like, they just weren't whoever I met with at that school, they weren't into it like I was.
Were they just were they just not at that school, or were they just like
no, they definitely were, but like I think
Okay.
I was just, and freshman year I just ended up in the wrong group. Not the wrong group, but a different group, a group that showed me had a shared interest in other things, but the music I was kind of on my own, I felt like. To the point where I remember driving to Cortland, New York during a snowstorm, which I shouldn't have done because the Ataris were playing in a small place.
Oh.
And I was like, well, I got to go with this. And I did. And it was a fantastic show. Actually, the first show I went to by myself too, which was a big moment to learn that you could do that. I feel like there's a certain point you learn that you can go to things yourself and how awesome it can be.
Right.
And that was my first one for that. And then around then I'm like, man, I really need to be closer to the city because I miss going to shows. And that kind of was a big part of my drive to transfer because, and it worked out great because that's what we did. We went to so many shows.
I mean, how many times have we seen Newfound Glory? I mean, honestly.
It's uncountable. Newfound Glory was the hardest working band in the world, still is to this day. I believe they still tour constantly, but they just were, they felt like every 2 months they were back in the area. And the beautiful thing about Newfound Glory and shows the scene at that time, I think, was it was an eclectic group of bands. You got a little bit of everything, and that was my favorite part about that scene, because I was like always trying to decide what the definition of like emo and punk were, and I'm like, is this emo and punk? But what is this? This is completely different. This is a sad man. This is a sad man with an acoustic guitar singing. But now here's a band screaming a whole bunch. I mean, but I loved it all. So,
but everything was. Well, that's what's great about that genre of emo in general and punk, is that it's funny like thinking about that definition. Actually, I was thinking about that actually with that. How would you define punk and emo now versus then? You go either answer. Back then, how would you do it, or how would you do it now?
Well, I think you can just talk about this forever, debate this.
Ever.
I mean, and I think this is true for majority of the bands we're going to talk about. I think the punk ethos is kind of where it all is born out of.
Yeah.
And what was punk in the late 70s, when it kind of first got coined, versus what was punk in the 80s and like, the DC scene and the hardcore scene, to the technical birth of emo out of that, to what Hot Topic was selling. And and then there was definitely people who'd be like, oh, that's not real emo, or that's not real punk. And I think that as the years have gone on, I like using punk emo as kind of like that subsection of like rock music, basically, that to me, yes, it's all music is emotional, so you can always say that, right? And people argue what actually is emo, and some people would say like, oh, Paramore is not emo, and it's like, well, yes, they are.
They are.
And then even though they have their new album, which by the way is fantastic, and it is a pop album, and it's amazing, it's a pop rock album. It's has very little to do with what they started with in terms of sound, but like to me, they're just, those bands will always be considered emo or emo punk because that's kind of like the root of what they started with. And I think to me, it comes from that world of like, I'm just gonna like put my heart on my sleeve, write songs that it don't need to be they don't need to be Radiohead songs. They can just be some chords, and you go out there and you let the emotion kind of really drive it more than anything else. So that to me is what it is. I mean, ultimately, I don't know if the full definition of punk and like the rebel against society part of it sticks very much. There are certainly bands who still keep it political and do that kind of thing, but for the most part, the stuff that I love really came out of just the aesthetic of the sound.
See, what I love where you went with that, because it was very similar to how I was kind of approaching. Because actually, I started asking myself the question. I'm like, well, what is it then versus now? Or for me, back then when we were younger, I have a feeling that's a phrase I'm gonna be saying a lot. When we were younger, I felt that punk and emo lyrically said the things I wanted to say, though I didn't know how to say it so well. And then tonally, the sound was the sound I felt. If you could make an emotion out of a sound, that's what I would do with. I would say that the you said emotion, the sound coming from the bands, this voracious tonal onslaught is how I felt. And I think that's made a real good connection for me. It's people coming together. We're different, right? But it's okay to be different. You could like Paramore and call it emo band. Cool. I think that's awesome. I agree. You look into the bands and you're like, okay, there was a sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. And when looking at the two separate, though, the emo versus punk, if you want to get into like a versus thing, it's like there's a magnifying glass on different things under the same kind of subgenres, where for me, punk was more of a magnifying glass on the environment in which you found yourself, right? The social, political, your community, what that looked like. That's kind of putting a magnifying lens or a lens just on your environment. But for emo, it was different. It would be more putting a magnifying glass on ourselves and how we felt and how do we feel about everything. So you couple them together. I always thought punk was kind of more of an external way of looking at things, and then versus emo is more of an internal. And so when you get those bands that kind of made those like Newfound Glory for me, I think kind of made that that connection. The bands like that, where they're looking at both. It's not just here's the environment, like because you can go into Pennywise and you can read about society and all about, and that's all. A lot of it's external, but then the other bands where it's more internal, that'd be your emo bands. And then kind of that couple in between is where that happy Venn diagram in the middle, where you have the looking at both the external and the internal.
That's amazing. That's a really well way to say it. I love the internal versus external lens that you're putting on both of them and how that gets there.
But it's funny, but that's years later, right? Like back then, never could have explained what that really means. Back then, I was like, this shit is loud. It sounds like how I want to sound, how I feel. I think that's like, that was what the immediate connection was. And when then, some of my favorite bands I found just because I like the way they sounded, not lyrically what they said. And then the lyrics came second. I was like, oh, these guys are actually, I like they're actually talking about something. I appreciate that.
It's interesting because I think my first connection to was about the introspective lyrics. It was hearing songwriters, because you've always heard songs about love or breakups and things, but like it felt like the bands who I think rose to the top especially were storytellers, and the songs were stories, and they were about and at that time, especially when you're in your adolescence, you're looking for something to reflect back to you that's you, and basically to show you're not alone in the world, because at that point your stew of emotions that you're going through as you are having first big life experiences for the first time, it's easy to kind of feel wondering who you are, and to hear a song that's like singing back to you what it's like to be you. I remember, like, I think it was the third Motion City soundtrack album has a song, it's called I'm blanking on the name right now, we'll look it up later. Dinosaur Life is the name of the album, and there's a song on there, and the singer is in the point of view of someone who's watching Veronica Mars at home, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm watching Veronica Mars. Yeah, so I don't know, it really it was funny. Like, it was a little bit like, oh, this is really catering to me, and I like this a lot. And that is like, I think, a very, I don't want to say shallow, but it's like, I think it's what the music was meant for. It's supposed to be like, oh, I feel something, I don't think about it too much, and it's reflecting back to me, and the music is fun and fast. If you like that feeling, that's what you're getting out of this. And it's yeah.
Well, with it, it's like I like what you said that. It's like it's I can't stand gatekeepers where they're like, oh, Paramore's not a, I'm like, oh, come on, guys. Look, if you get like, I can't stand it. People are like, we'll name 3 songs. I'm like, I don't give a shit if I can name 3 songs. I listened to an album. Guess what? I enjoyed it. I got something out of it. Because what I love about punk and emo is it runs the gamut, man. You've got crazy such a spectrum to land on, because I said, remember before, you got Pennywise, all right, so you got, I've heard them referred to as, what was it, bro punk, right, which is kind of like, I'm like, all right, but it's fast paced, they've got great hooks, they've got really catchy choruses that you can sing along, like the call and answer is always a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But then on the other end of the spectrum, let's go a little more lighthearted, right? Let's be lighthearted to a degree, like Bouncing Souls, much more lighthearted. The Ramones were all about relationships and like meeting the girl down at Burger King to get a chicken sandwich. Like that was what they brought into. But let's go back. I can take that parallel again. Go over to the Sex Pistols. Again, loud, aggressive, more about politics. It's just so it's funny that I don't see that spectrum in any other genre. I don't. I don't think you can have it.
Well, I think that's ultimately why you could have a thing like a Warped Tour or the mythical now skate and surf fest that used to happen in the early 2000s in New Jersey in Asbury Park, which I'm sure we'll talk about it from time to time because still some of the greatest concerts experience I ever had. You could have all these different bands on the same bill. Like you can go around and that was the scene. And I think that's where we step back. It's not so much about if this band is punk, if this band is emo, if this band is hardcore, if this band is screamo, if this band is new, metalcore, whatever you want to call these different subgenres of the genre, which I think it all is. I think it's all a subgenre of punk rock. All these things fall under that umbrella. What they do is, and this is true for at least in the United States, in different cities, different towns, different suburbs of cities, scenes grow out of the local bands and people's love for these music. And then you start going to shows, you see the same people at the shows because it's become like this like clubhouse in itself. It's reflecting back. Isn't that what we're looking for? And you may not be friends with everybody at the show, but like for a moment when you're all singing along together, it's it's a powerful experience.
Well, it gets back to like the community, that you're not alone, right? I think for a lot of people get into punk and emo around the same time, right? Middle school, late middle school, early high school, maybe around there. Which, if you look at it, that's a transitory time in one's life, right? And you start, emotions come in, you start thinking other things, different bodies changing, hormones changing, obviously emotions are changing. And then sometimes you come across a sound you just kind of resonate with you. That kind of, it's like I said, the tonal version of how you feel. And then when you go to shows, like I still remember going to my first few shows. What was my first show? Now I'm trying to remember what my very first show was. Gosh, I don't even know. I know the actual first show I ever saw, Smashing Pumpkins, the Madison Square Garden. I was trying to think what my first like punk show.
Hard to beat that.
Hard to beat that, right? But it was the one. It was that was the show they had to postpone because of all the shenanigans that happened about the Smashing Pumpkins. But I remember going to punk shows, and like you said, everybody starts singing along, and you're like, everybody else is digging this just as much as I am, right? And then what really gets me is when I go to see shows, and like we go crazy for like the quiet song and the one everybody slept on, but it was always a great song. And then they play, and you're like, look, other people like that's amazing. I'm not weird that I like this song. Other people like this song as well. I mean, it makes you feel, like I said, you're part of something bigger than you.
I mean, I have a question for you, and because this is how I process music for most of my life. I tend to see everything like in my life as a movie, so that means I need to have soundtracks over my life.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That was like my favorite songs were ones that I could like, picture a montage in my life to that song, or that's playing in the background of like a big moment and it's like slowly getting faded in. And I feel like that's what I was looking for at the time, at that adolescent stage, music that was going to heighten my life experience and feel like add to it, like a movie soundtrack does or show soundtrack. And now when I look at it, I'm like, yes, there's nostalgia, which obviously, as South Park, always points out, member berries, is the things that are constantly given to us so we can keep buying the stuff from our youth. And then also it continues to like grow in its importance, because it's not so much like, oh, woe is me, I need to listen to this song because I feel sad about a breakup, or like, oh, this person doesn't like me, or my friend's a jerk to me now. And though because I've had those experiences, I've had, you go through growing up, you start to have these different kind of ups and downs in your life, and like the goods and the bads, and like these songs for me, kind of like, even the ones that were sad, that were like angsty because I was like feeling sad when I was younger, now they kind of make me feel great. Like, or they always have, but now that's what it's about. It's like, if I'm having a bad day, there are songs I put on that just instantly make me feel better again. They kind of like reignite my spark.
What is there any particular song, like right out of the gate, you can say, right, like you think about right now and you're like, man, that makes me happy just thinking about it?
I have my number one go-to song that when life is a little shitty and kind of kicks your ass a little bit, whatever that is, whether it's something major in your life, or the gas prices went up again, and I'm like downtrodden for that moment, like, oh, this sucks. Famous Last Words by My Chemical Romance, last song on Black Parade.
Great song.
It's a drug to me. I mean, it fills me with like this confidence that like, oh, I can do anything. I can take on any challenge, and I'm going to come out on top and walk through the fire.
That's right. It's the last few words in that song, I think, is where that's going to come from. Like, that I am not afraid to walk this world alone. I mean, I think that's just that is like, someone else gets it. Like, but then you can hear it, and you can hear, like you said, with the confidence that Gerard's talking, with the confidence of that. And you're like, I can be that way too. And I can be just as confident about that too. I love that about that song.
Well, and the bridge of that song, where awake and unafraid, asleep or dead. Like, I don't know. And I'm sure we'll talk much about My Chemical Romance and the brilliance of what they do. But the way that it's so simple, succinct, that's what you get from punk, right? Like, it's just, this is an epic song. Don't get me wrong. That album Black Parade is a opera, right? It's a rock opera. But when it comes down to it, it's just like distilled emotion into a few words, and it means so much. And that, again, comes back to why I love this kind of music. And I love this music, and I love the music that it showed me from, like, the, dare I say, the descendants of bands that we listen to, or the bands we listen to are descendants of other bands like the Descendants. And I loved learning about that and going back and like finding these bands who I missed because either I was too young, or I just was too busy like thinking about, well, these are the bands that matter, not these. But over the years, I've gone back and I've like gotten appreciation for so many of these bands who came before and really shaped the scene as it is. And it's fun to think about who would be on the Mount Rushmore of punk emo if they had to make one. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm going to approach this from a personal standpoint. If I was going to do this, if I could sum up for me the big four, right? The what four I would imagine like that really shaped the way I looked at it. Do you want to go one for one? Do you want to go the whole list?
Well, I think we could do the whole list for this one.
Okay. All right. So if I'm going to do a big four,
I
have to start with where it began for me, which was Green Day. We're going to start with Green Day. Okay. Dookie came out. It's bonkers. Like, I just remember listening to like FOD. Like, if I need a song to perk me back up, I'm putting on FOD, and I'm going to scream as it gets to when all the band comes in. It's so great. But then around that same time frame, I'd have to go to the second band that I really embraced, which for me was Bad Religion.
Oh yeah.
Big BR fan. I remember the album that hit, and I was like, okay, I like it. I like this. It was my like second band I kind of like put my arms around and embraced. The third one that's still in the same time, but it's again kind of like Bad Religion, was an older band. I didn't really know it at the time, was Social Distortion. Big Mike Ness fan. Mike is that kind of guy that you're having a crappy day, just throw on Social D because Mike's been there. Mike, no question of that. Mike's probably been into all the shit you ever have felt in life. Mike probably has a song about it. And then for me, the last one was the band that introduced me to like we were talking about the Descendants, not the band, but like the Descendants of bands. But I love the Descendants. But the second band that came after. And for me, or that second wave that came after that first wave, that was Alkaline Trio. I think what Matt and Dan brought or bring is this different way of they added more of a macabre soundtrack to it. Like they kind of took what worked with the Misfits and then brought it and made it new. And I think that so if you were gonna you asked me my big four, for me, it'd be Green Day, Bad Religion, Social Distortion, and Alkaline Trio.
That's an impressive list of great bands all around. And you're right, they all kind of hit different things, right?
Right.
Bad Religion is like the punk band because like they were talking about society, and they
Right.
I mean, you listen to the lyrics of 21st Century Digital Boy, which is a banger of a song, and like you think that song came out in the mid to late 90s before the 21st century, and aren't we all 21st century digital
right? Honestly,
folks
yeah.
now?
I mean, just oh man, I remember hearing that song for the first time, and I'm like, wow, he has really kind of summed up how I feel about myself at the moment. I mean, it was like,
Well, it's funny. I also obviously Green Day is just an essential band for me. A similar thing where Green Day kind of was like how I discovered that punk was even a thing. If that makes
right.
sense. Like
No, it does. No, it makes total sense.
I didn't
Total
know
sense.
what that was. I just know that I heard. I think those every single on Dookie, like I would hear those songs and I would just be like, what is this? What
Mhm.
this it just felt like everything I was waiting for in music. I think, I grew up kind of like as most people do, like my parents were playing music. My dad is a big rock fan and had tons of CDs, and he had his favorite. I mean, the Beatles and Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel and all that's Billy Joel because we're from Long Island, and it was like you had to, like every house came with the entire discography.
Yes, it's like a catalog, comes in the mail. It's by requirement.
But but he didn't have punk. He didn't like punk.
Hmm.
And to this day, like it's just something like I just don't like the sound, my dad says. I'm like, okay, there it is. You're never gonna get into it. But like Green Day was like, oh, you have not been looking in this direction. And guess what? If you like Green Day, you're going to like all these other bands. And and suddenly, like for me, it was me seeking out. This is back before we had Spotify at our disposal, and like literally I was like, I like Green Day, and some kid would be like, well, if you like Green Day, then you're gonna like The Offspring, or you're gonna like Millencolin. Well, like you get to Millencolin eventually, but Millencolin rocks. Anyway, but yeah, you get to the Bouncing Souls. Like, oh, you like that? They're from New Jersey, and they're like
well, and it was more like, wait, there are punk bands in New Jersey? That's like one state away. And then that would make you think, well, what bands are here? Like, are there bands here? Like, no, Green Day is that introduction. 100%. It's the introduction to for both of us, and where it's like it's well, we did a Venn diagram. That's the Venn. I've brought a Venn diagram now twice. But if you did a Venn diagram, that's the center right there. It's Green Day, the starting point for both of us. Where'd you go from there?
Well, actually, Green Day's not even on my my Mount Rushmore.
It's not even your Mount Rushmore. Oh, I'm even more excited now.
Well, that's because here's the thing. We look. We're gonna pull the curtain back. Phil and I discussed this before the first 0 episode of our podcast, and to think about the Mount Rushmore. And I really wanted to come in here and be like, just flex and be like, well, obviously it's the Descendants, the Misfits, Minor Threat, and Jawbreaker.
I mean,
and then like every music snob will respect me. And because I'm like, look at and don't get me wrong, I think all those bands are super influential to what became the punk and emo scene that we really, thrived in. And you said it, Alkaline Trio is a perfect example. There is Alkaline Trio is Descendants meets Misfits.
Like they're buddies, right? Yeah, they're
yeah.
like, if they had a child, that's what if Descendants and the Misfits had a child, it would look like Alkaline Trio.
Yeah.
Or sound like it. Yeah.
But I decided, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I have my list, but I decided to kind of like, I'm gonna shoot from the hip a little bit and just go. I couldn't land on my top 4 because much like my music taste, there's times where it would change.
It was like, all right, 16-year-old me, what would you say, right? And I still think, Jim, because this is why I went with these 4. If it wasn't for these 4, for me, I wouldn't have found the others.
Right.
Like this is the starting point for me. This is what, looking back, where my influence starts is these 4 bands, really, in different ways.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah. I think that's the way to do it. I decided to not do that. That's why Green Day is not on mine. They should be, but if I went that way, I'm not going to
easy answer. Yeah.
I'm looking at it now just at like what the last 20 years of punk emo kind of like what rose to the top of that genre that I've loved so much for so long. And for me, this is my current iteration. It is Taking Back Sunday.
Okay, good choice.
Mostly, I think, because we are paying homage to the diner life on Long Island, and they are. I mean, look, they are. That Tell All Your Friends is an absolute classic. It's lightning in a bottle. It's just, to me, represents everything that punk emo bands could be. It's an indie album that is nothing but callbacks and dueling vocals and just upbeat tempos and just sad breakup songs and heartbreak and what I just said same thing twice. That's fine. And
they shot a video at our college.
They sure did.
Sure did.
Because
just the way that album opened, particularly with, I mean, we'll eventually talk about Tell All Your Friends, but like so sick of being tired and so tired of being sick. I'm like, what an opening line to an album.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
No, it's dramatic because it's just full of adolescent angst, and it's that I think that Taking Back Sunday and their Long Island roots make it impossible for me not to have them up there. But next, I would say, while Taking Back Sunday perfected the sing along with cute without the E, you hear those opening chords, and then everybody's going to jump in and sing along and jump up and down. I have to put the person who kind of deconstructed it all and brought it back down to its roots, and that would be Chris Carrabba in Dashboard Confessional. Because everything that these bands do, he kind of started off doing on his own with just an acoustic guitar,
right? And
wrote these very, basically ripped from the live journal pages, confessions as they were. I think I remember him saying the reason he called the outfit Dashboard Confessional, it's because it's late at night, you just went through a breakup or something, or a fight with a friend or whatever it is, or a fight with your parents, whatever it is, and you're driving, and it's just the dashboard is your confessional as you just say your feelings and your deepest, darkest emotions come out.
But I heard that story. I'm going to say this. I hope to God it's true, because if that is true, that's one of the greatest band names I've ever heard.
I hope so too.
It's still up there, honestly. It's probably one of the best band names I've ever heard.
Yeah, and it's that evolution. And what I think that's been amazing about watching him for the last couple decades is he started off with just him. Very quickly, he grew popular. He added a band. Then the albums kind of like were more about a band. But then, like, just recently, I feel like there was we'll talk about more of this too. There was a resurgence in the last last decade of like all these bands kind of came back,
right,
big time. But like he came back and like he did acoustic tours in between the band tours, and he played with other bands, and he went back to Dashboard, and it all culminated, I think, for me, the Dashboard experience it's the song Vindicated on the Spider-Man 2 soundtrack. Suddenly I'm here, and I'm like, here is emo and Spider-Man together at last, two of the most important things in my pop culture life, and it all came together with that. So Dashboard is up there, and I'm sure he feels vindicated to know he's on my Mount Rushmore.
You know what, I'm sure right now out somewhere in Southern California, he is right probably near you, just popped outside and just started singing it.
I hope so. I hope so. All right, the next one is tough. The next one is, there are 3 bands on my list, and I'm going to say one of them. I don't know which one I'm about to say. It's Blink-182. There it is.
There it is.
I was going to try to like keep it to bands that started after 2000, but Blink, if Green Day was here's punk, Blink was like, but here's your band.
Yes.
And I much like most people our age group, Blink-182 just it was just, they are the soundtrack makers. They were the biggest band, I think, of this genre, and probably in a lot of ways the most influential. I feel like Enema the State, by the time that came out, between Enema State and Take Your Pants Off and Jacket a couple years later, that's when like the emo punk scene as we know it,
that never ceases to make me laugh. That title is so funny.
Well, you know, sometimes you gotta take off your pants and jacket, when you come in the house.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah. So I think back to that era of Blink, and you look at like Tom, for example, and he just has that like swoopy emo hair.
Yeah.
And they're all wearing black at that point. Like they used to wear all Hurley shirts before and colorful like surf skate punk stuff. But then by taking their pants off jacket, they're still wearing Dickies, I think, but they're wearing black, and they are kind of like, I don't know. It's like it's the pop version of all this, right? And they do it so well. And it's like, I was actually thinking about Blink-182 the other day, is the difference between Blink-182 and every other band I like, for the most part, is like, I was thinking about how Blink-182 doesn't actually ever really rock. Let me hear me out. I feel like
explain that one. All right, let me hear you on this one.
I feel like every other band of this genre at some point sometimes I'm just like, yes, this song fucking rocks. And I feel like Blink never really fucking rocks. They just rock a little. I don't know. It's hard.
That's such an interesting take, because I'm like, I don't know. There's some bangers out there, man. But
I don't think they're bangers, but they're never just like. And obviously, again, this is a audio medium, but I'm like thrashing my head here and like yes, and like they don't really do that. But don't get me wrong. I mean, Carousel rocks in its own way. Damn It, of course, rocks. And then you go into even later songs, later albums like Feeling This. Come on, I mean, it gets you up and jumping, but like I'm just like they never like rock. And I think that also is because their drummers are probably the best drummer who ever existed. So it's a kind of a different. I don't know. This is also the point in the podcast where I should tell you I know nothing about music theory or how music works. So all this is just emotion based.
As it should be, considering the show and genre of which we speak. It should be how you feel. It's how you feel. That's all it's about. Look, you know what? It's a good segue. I'm going to go into it. My buddy James, very smart man. Very much.
Do you ever call him Saint Jimmy?
You know what? Maybe next time I see him, I will. He's a very smart man. He's very much into the scene, and he made a really great point. I was talking to him about this kind of concept for a show. And he made a really great point. He said, like, musicians, they come in, they write their song, they spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a few days working out the lyrics, working out the rhythm, getting to music theory, right? How a song gets built. They work at it. It's short term for them. It's not short term for us, right?
Oh, yeah,
like
wise.
I'm telling you, James, very smart man. He's like, explained to it, so I gotta give credit to him because I don't want to take it. He deserves it. But his point was so profound. I'm like, wow, you were absolutely right. Like, musicians come in, Blink comes in, writes one song, right? And they get whatever they get out of it. But we sit on these songs for years, decades, and we get more out of it than they do.
I love that. And I think that's true. I think it's fascinating to think about that, because especially I'm sure, you talk to the people in these bands, we are in such a, look, 2023 turns out to be the 20-year anniversary of 2003, as that's how math works. But 2003 is very quickly being reminded to me that like how many essential albums that were all came out that year. In fact,
Yeah.
I mean, like I think later we'll be talking about some albums. And I'm like, there's a bunch from 2003 on my list of albums I like, and like
Yeah.
it's.
I think
I wonder how those bands feel now, is because of what your friend St. James said about they 20 years ago, laid down the track for this song, put it out, and here we are 20 years later, and they're probably these songs are probably bigger than they ever were. To certain people,
Well, look at Green Day. Their first big song is a song about masturbation, and they have to live with that song for 30 years to play.
Yeah, but don't you feel like they love that still?
They probably do. I'm not. Yeah. I'm sure that. Well, that's yes. I would say yes to your answer.
Yes.
But just imagine that your first big song is a single about about masturbation, and that you're going to live with that for the next 30 years
30 and beyond.
and beyond, because they're not slowing down. All right, we've got through 3 with you. Take It Back Sunday, Our Friends DC, Dashboard Confessional, and you got Blink.
Yes.
Where are we going to land in the end?
Well, what's missing here is, my favorite aesthetic goes back to the Misfits. It goes back to the goth punk world.
I got a feeling.
The darkness. I love comic books. I love world building. I love vampires. I love emotion, and taking punk, taking emo into this whole other larger than life kind of evil imagery at times, but not evil, like skeletons and I'm rambling here because I just want to talk about my favorite band of all time, My Chemical Romance.
My Chemical Romance. I had a feeling this was coming. I did.
I mean, they could just take over every spot on the Mount Rushmore for what I care. They are the distillation of everything I like in music, and they just put it all together. And I'm like, this is exactly what I want. It does everything. It rocks. Their songs, and it's funny to the casual person who hears My Chemical Romance, they might hear Helena or I'm Not Okay and be like, oh, it's just emo, sad stuff. But it's like, no, that's not majority of their songs. They are epic storytellers. And their songs just are so rich with imagery, and they're fun, and they got this like bratty sass to them. And yeah, I can't get enough.
I hear you. No, with MCR, they're like, it's bratty and sassy. It's just like, so they embrace that childlike punk rock stuff. We're like, the very fuck you attitude, right?
Yeah.
That's what I love about them. But at the same time, the musicianship is outstanding for a punk band. Like, and let's be honest. I mean, they're not just 4 chords and that's the end of it. Or if you're the Ramones, 3 chords. They write bangers, like absolute bangers of songs. Amazing.
And they just put out their first new song in like almost a decade, and it came out, and Foundations of Decay is the name of the song. If you haven't listened to it, I listened to it like 100 times the first week it came out. It doesn't matter. It is, and it really is, for the first new My Chemical Romance song in many, many years. It was like a perfect like representation of what they all do so well, because it's like the metaphoric epic story and world it builds with imagery of like towers and someone walking through a desolate wasteland. Like it just and then it just like breaks down and rocks in ways that like at times I'm like, oh my god, this almost sounds like Saves a Day at times, and this sounds like it's obviously the Iron Maiden influences in the guitars, and like it's I don't know, it's they are
that particular song. I feel like that's like the Dark Tower. If the Dark Tower, the Stephen King, but like, that was a song. I feel like that would be the song.
Well, that's exactly it. Is Dark Tower. I mean, that's the thing. Like you feel like it. You can like take that song and you just go into this world, and it's I don't know. It really is impressed me, and that's and you said it yourself, the musicianship of them. I mean, that's what makes them. That's why we are here years later, they had went on hiatus or broke up for whatever it was in like 2013, and then just came back, you know,
Mhm.
in 2019, which somehow I was very fortunate that I got tickets to the return show, which was hands down, shout out the dashboard, hands down one of the greatest concerts I ever been to in my life, because I had loved that band pretty much since they first started coming around in their little white tour van. And I saw My Chemical Romance open for the first time for Finch and the Used, and I want to
Oh,
say this is
geez.
like 2000, late 2002, early 2003, and it was my first time. I had already kind of heard their album, and I was like obsessed with it. They had a song about vampires, which got me in right away, but then I was like
Mm.
lose my mind about it. And I love the whole album so much. And they came on stage, and I don't know anything about A&R. I don't know anything about the music industry, but I knew that this band was so different than every other band in the scene. They just had this like this energy and this like captivation. And there's Gerard on stage in this like dirty leather jacket, and just like
Right.
it was just like, oh, what is this? Because this is bigger than all this stuff. This is the thing.
It,
And yeah, and then going to the return show, I had all that and I was standing around talking to a bunch of people, and they were all like speculating, what are they gonna open up with? The band's been gone for 7 years. What are they gonna open up with?
mm.
And I'm happy to say they opened up with I'm Not Okay, which was like the perfect like banger, just to be like, we're
Oh,
back.
yeah. Yeah.
And to experience it at one point, Gerard, I think, asked the crowd, how many people here at their first My Chemical Romance show? And I would say 75% of the people were at their first My Chemical Romance show, which means it was
No
an
kidding.
entire generation who now grew up with them without ever seeing them. And I'm so happy to have been in there, and because the energy there was like something I hadn't felt in years.
Yeah.
And it was really a special experience.
I remember seeing on the Black Parade tour, they played, it was Arena, right? Black Parade's big album. They were doing Arena tour. It was them, Rise Against, and I forget who was it was the front. I remember being very unimpressed with Rise Against, which is sad because I'm a big Rise Against fan. But like it just the audio levels were just so garbled. You couldn't like even understand it. But then My Chemical, they come out and it like just rip right through all the Black Parade. And I was always like, wow, at this point, you had told me about them. You were actually the reason I got into them. You were like, check out this band. I was like, okay. Usually you told me to check someone out. I was like, go check it out. Let's see what it's like. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. Like I wasn't big in Sparta, right? But I liked At the Drive-Thru. Anyway, you had mentioned that one. So I go see, we're see, my wife and I are there. Actually, were we married at that point? Yeah, we might have been. Anyway, so we were there. They come out, they rip through the Black Parade, they kill it, start to finish. I mean, it's amazing. They got the costumes on and all this, and then they don't even leave the stage, right? And Gerard takes off the jacket. He's like, "Get this fucking uniform off me!" Like, whips it across the stage, and they immediately go into "I'm Not Okay," and they start doing all the songs from the first two albums. I mean, and I remember watching them. They're like, they're like a pop band, right? They can control an audience like a pop band does.
Yep.
Which is just goes to show you how big of a band they really are. I think there's waves.
Yep.
So we talked about before with Green Day. Green Day was a Descendants, been one band leading to the next, leading to the next. You had Green Day comes in, introduced all of us to the sound. Because there was a vacuum, and as we know, nature hates a vacuum at that point, and Green Day came in and filled that vacuum. And then from there, you had Blink-182. They come up right to the next level. And then I feel like MCR is the next band that kind of took it to the next level and made it even bigger than all that. And I don't know who's doing it now. I don't have an opinion on that one just yet. But I feel over the last 20-ish years, those are the three that I would agree with you there, kind of flow into one another.
Yeah.
And to really push the genre forward.
Well, I don't know if this blew my mind. If you haven't read it, Dan Ozzi's Sellout is
very good.
Is the best book on this scene, I think, ever. And basically what he does is he starts with Green Day, and he talks about a different band who signed to a major label from like 1994 to about 2007, and he has a chapter on each of these bands. And the through line, which I think is amazing, from Green Day to My Chemical Romance, is like the producer, Robert Cavillo of Dookie, produced Mike Hem, I believe
Was it Three Cheers,
Three
right?
Cheaters
Yeah.
and Black Parade. So
Black
it's interesting learning about, like, as I said, I don't know much about the music industry and how it actually
Right.
works, but when you start to realize, like, oh, same producer or same mixer. I mean, the big one I that's come up over and over again is Jerry Finn. His legacy of the bands. I mean, he did Alkaline Trio. He did Blink's big albums. You know, the Untitled Blink album, which is like I think their masterpiece, and then also AFI Sing the Sorrow. Like, you know, like you start to like look at like,
Yeah.
or did he do AFI December Underground? Maybe it was that one. Doesn't matter. Point is, he had his hands on some incredible albums, and it's just interesting to see that person who did all that.
Well, it's maybe down the road we should do an episode about producers, not the bands.
Oh, interesting. Why not?
I was just thinking about that. Like, imagine a whole Rob Cavallo episode. I mean, it's like, let's get into Butch Vig real quick. You know, bring all the different bands he broke. I mean, that would be interesting. That would be. I'm gonna write that one down. Another one we hit upon it, and I'm gonna suggest it down the road. Listen for it, kids. It'll happen. 1995 versus 2003. What's the better year?
2003.
See,
I'm not supposed to answer that yet?
No, I'm like, see, I'm on the fence. And see, I'm like, naturally, I'm like 95. I don't know. A lot of bands broke 95.
As someone who is wasting all their money on these 20th anniversary tours this year, I can tell you. 2000.
So, all right.
Not wasting. Happily
investing in my own entertainment and good nature. Yep. So the folks at home, be prepared. Down the road, the debate will happen. 95 versus 2003, Phil versus Jeff. We'll find out what happens.
You know, Phil, we haven't really talked about what this podcast is going to be, and we want to we're going to be doing this week to week, and this is a very different episode. Again, issue 0, right. Foil cover on one side, one variant, right. Bag with a trading card of Phil, and the other one. Some more comic book humor for you. We are going to be spending every episode going forward on one album.
Right.
That's what we're gonna do. That's gonna be the basis of our conversation, is talking about that album, why we love it, what we think about it now. We're gonna re-listen to it the week before we record. And we're also going to be inviting guests on, people we know from our days of going to shows back in the day, to people we've now met over the years who we've bonded with over our love for this music. So that's going to be kind of the whole feeling. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, you're going to be able to hear songs that we choose to play along. And I feel like, Phil, we're at that point now. I think we've finished part 1 of this episode. So maybe we should play a song for the kids at home and the senior citizens at home.
What are you suggesting?
Well, I think I'd like you to pick a song.
Oh, you want to pick? Let's go. You know what? I'm going to go back and look at our lists.
Why don't you look at your Mount Rushmore and choose a song for one of the bands? You know, you're on the spot, so you don't have to have a deep meaning reason for it. It could just rock.
Let's just, you know what? Let's go with the one that got me going. No, I'm gonna do Alkaline Trio. I was leaning towards Stupid Kid. I decided to go against it.
Wow.
I know, right?
What's happening instead of Stupid Kid? Is it going to be off the same album?
No, I'm actually gonna go. Well, no, maybe I will keep it. You know what? Fuck it. Let's just play Maybe I'll Catch Fire.
Wow, that turned left there. I thought you were gonna go back and say let's do Stupid Kid, but Maybe I'll Catch Fire.
Maybe I'll Catch Fire. Let's go.
So yeah, so if you're listening on Spotify, the song will just come on. If you're listening to this another way, maybe on YouTube, watching Phil's pretty face, then why don't you just pause right now and go listen to it? And we're back. We just listened to a song by the Alkaline Trio called Maybe I'll Catch Fire. That song is off their second album. That's correct. What was the name of that album, Phil?
What, Maybe I'll Catch Fire is the name of the album.
Yes, it is. There it is. Love that.
Love that. That's a great song.
It's an awesome song.
Yeah.
That, and then that album, and I'm sure we'll talk about that one in depth. But I feel like people forget about that album because all they take is radio off it, which is one of the quintessential Alkaline Trio songs that they usually close their set with, either that or 97, right? So
correct.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Another banger of a song.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
So, although what's funny though, one time we saw them, that was like a fourth, fifth, sixth song in kind of song, which I thought was odd.
Yeah, they I will say this, if you love Alkaline Trio and haven't seen them in a while, go see them because they are the band who I think over the years, you never know what they're gonna play. They mix their set list up so well. You get deep cuts, you get everything. I remember telling you about this spell. This is like probably like 8 or 9 years ago now, maybe 7 years ago. I don't know. They played all 4 nights
Right.
of the Troubadour, and they played 2 albums a night, starting with the first album, their latest album, and they paired them off like that. And I went to all 4 nights and heard all 8 albums in their entirety, which was quite just a beautiful experience. Like you don't get to do that ever, you know?
No, because a lot of times bands don't, like we've talked about already about sleeper songs, right? Well, some of those like deep track hidden gems that are just amazing, but they never play, right? They never play.
Well, sometimes life hands you lemons, and instead of making lemonade, you end up on a deserted island away from everyone who loves you and all your luxuries at home. But for some reason, when you're stuck in this deserted island in this scenario that we are now bringing in this new segment, we're going to talk about how while we were dropped off on this island to spend the remainder of our days, plenty of food, by the way, so we're and water, we're okay with that,
and electricity.
There's actually a diner on the island, which really helps.
With the greatest jukebox ever inside, right? That's going to have everything we need.
Yeah, but the jukebox can only have 10 albums. So we're going to sit here and I think we're going to go one for one. We're going to go through our list of our deserted island. Is it desert? What did I just say? Desert island?
You did say desert island, yes. Deserted
island, not a desert island.
Not a desert island. Well, see, now a desert island, that would this is what happens when you get two English majors start talking. A desert island would imply it is an island covered in sand.
Right.
A desert island, not a deserted island, which would be no one on it.
Right. Well, it's mostly deserted except for that diner.
It's actually
the diner from Sandman, so watch out if you read that comic or seen that episode of.
Yes, I have. I did see that one. That's a very strange episode. That was.
Loved it.
Goodness.
Loved it. So 10 albums. These are our deserted island episodes. We can only bring 10, and this is what we're going to listen to the rest of our lives. And I want to hear why you picked these out, why you picked yours.
And it's your 10 against my 10.
I don't think there's a competition.
Well, I phrased that poorly. Oh, that'd be a poll and that'd be a nice little survey. No, I phrased that incorrectly. Your 10 and my 10.
Yes.
Very good. Okay.
And also, I want to warn the listeners. I don't know what you picked, and I know I definitely stepped away from the traditional emo punk sometimes, and that's okay. But
that's totally 100%. No, I want you to do that. That's really great because I myself stepped away and went to look. If I'm going to go on a deserted island, I'm going to bring these 10 because if I only can listen to 10 things, I think these are the 10 things I'm going to listen to. So I got to admit, one or two leads, I was like, no one's going to like this one, but all right, I'm going to go with it.
Phil, could our deserted island be Long Island just like after like the apocalypse?
I mean, it can very honestly, no. I think anything. If there is an apocalypse that occurs, the fucking people of Long Island would survive because I just think that's just the way. Well, we're already irradiated because of Brookhaven, so we might as well survive the apocalypse.
All right, well then we're not on Long Island for this deserted island.
And honestly, I really hope the folks on Long Island aren't the ones who are going to like repopulate the earth because it'll just be complaining about the LIE.
Ding ding ding! Phil's first slander of people of Long Island.
No, I'm a guy who grew up on Long Island, guys. Like, come on, you all know the LAE sucks, right? You all hate it, but you're not going to do anything about it. You're just going to complain about it.
All right. Here we go.
All right,
do you want to kick us off? Give us the first album on the list.
The first album, I'm going to start simple. This is a nice, easy one. We're going to accept it. It's Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell by Social Distortion.
All right, one of the bands on your.
One of the bands on my Mount Rushmore. And so the reason why I would say that, because we did talk about that, Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell is where Social Distortion went from that storytelling viewpoint, and they've really solidified what they can do together. I mean, it's more about Mike talking about himself, but bringing in kind of like this like country thing. So they kind of took what was working on the previous albums, like with Prison Bound and the self-titled, and then really fleshed it out in Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell.
That's
Like
fantastic.
like Cold Feelings, man, that's a great song. You're feeling, like I said before earlier, if you're ever feeling down, Mike Ness has been there. Cold Feelings is a great way to go talk about that. But then Bad Luck if you're feeling down again, like good, good song. Good songs on a good album.
All right, awesome. Glad to hear that will be with you on the jukebox at your diner on your. We're on separate desert islands, which is
We are,
which
but
is funny.
well, what's even funnier is that we're actually looking at one another too. It's like we were in our college dorm room when we would chat via instant messenger versus just leaning over to talk to one another.
Well, yeah, who wants to talk that early in the
Who
morning?
wants to talk early in the morning?
All right. Well, my first one, I'm gonna take one that would have been on my like really cool music aficionado list that said host of the one I actually put on, and I'm gonna take a Jawbreaker album, and I'm taking
There
Dear
you go.
You.
Nice.
Dear You is an album I came to later because Jawbreaker was no more by the time we were
Right.
getting into stuff, and I did not realize until years later how influential they were, as particularly Dear You, which I think is a perfect album. And it's and again, read Dan Ozzi's book because the chapter on Jawbreaker is mind-blowing when you hear the story of what happened with this album as their sellout
Oh
album.
gosh, yeah.
They were a band who was in the punk scene who basically told their audience they would never sell out, and then Green Day hit, and from NorCal, and that's where I think Jawbreaker was at the time, and they were like, "Great, we'll also go to Warner Brothers and work with Rob Cavallo and make an amazing, brilliant record that would not be appreciated for
decades,
at least decades."
Right.
But now they've gotten their due. They have been. I got to see them now twice in the last few years. In fact, the last tour I went to was the Dear You anniversary tour. And they sound amazing. But why Dear You? I mean, when you talk about literary lyrics,
yeah,
like Blake's lyrics are Raymond Carver short story-esque, like they just are. There's so much going on, and they're stories, and they bring this feeling that makes you ache, and it makes you jump up and down, but it also just makes you like, I don't know, just does everything that the music can do. It's in this album.
It's just funny though, because that's the only album where he has the clean voice, right?
Yeah.
He's not that gritty, that the band kind of. See, I think going back to that book, I think that's kind of what worked against them. Is that they have, this is their sellout album because it's on a major label and because they sound different. Well, he sounds differently because, well, I'm sorry, he had really horrible things he had to get rid of, and that made it so that he actually sounded differently. Versus that, I gotta admit, there was the grittiness is something I've always appreciated with him on the earlier albums, but I also understand why, and don't hold it against him that he sounded differently in the Dear You.
All right, what's next on your list, Bill?
I'm gonna go to the band. At one point, I would have said is the only band that mattered. It was questionably going to be on the big four, but I decided against it, which is The Clash.
Ooh.
So for me, London Calling, yeah, it's the big album for them, but honestly, it's the best album for them, because I think that's The Clash at its best. Lyrically, tonally, sound wise, where they're heading, it opens with that ridiculous bass line in London Calling. I mean, that bass line's ridiculous. But there's also some ska songs in there with Love Is Rock. There is, they get into the political social world still, but they also took time to go to the emotional side. So it's like, listen to Lost in the Supermarket just once, right? It's a very emotional song. And I think that is The Clash bringing in that kind of, and because they did it, it allowed other punk bands to bring that emotional side to it, looking at themselves, right? Kind of framing how I approached all of this week is from that perspective.
I love that. I Lost in the Supermarket is
such a good song.
Might be one of my favorite Clash song. I just absolutely love that song. You know what, Phil? Why don't we listen to Lost in the Supermarket?
You know what? Let's do that. I like that. Let's do that.
All right, and there it was, Lost in the Supermarket, a perfect little song, I think.
Perfect
by
song.
The Clash.
Perfect song.
You
Perfect
heard it here first. Phil Corber says the Clash is emo, so please send your
I
angry
did.
letters directly to Phil.
Bring it on. I look forward to it.
Uh,
I'm gonna get lit up for that one.
that's fine. Clash is an emo band. There we go.
The Clash is an emo band. Haha.
So I'll go next.
Okay.
I can't believe it's taken this long in a music podcast to bring up Phoebe Bridgers, but Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers is coming with me to the island because I feel things and I like to be sad. And I like to feel heavy emotions. And Phoebe's hauntingly beautiful voice is the vehicle that brings the feelings. No, I think she's just a phenomenal songwriter. I find her music is in ways confessional and poetic, and just her turns of phrases are clever and it's funny sometimes and it's so heartbreaking in others. I mean, I'm so excited for her career because I just can't wait to see where she goes from here.
That's a newer album too. I mean, that's not that old.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And you're already, it's on the list already.
Oh, it was an instant. I mean, I had that feeling. I feel it happens less and less, obviously, over the years for an album to come come around and hit me like that. But like, it came out during the lockdown pandemic, and it was it was a
hot minute. We needed something different, something to grab. I understand. My thing with the pandemic, I started becoming a record collector.
There it is.
Need something to do.
Do you have Punisher on vinyl?
I do not. That I do not. All right, I don't.
I also want to give major props to the album for teaching me a word that I should have known, but did not know, which is a Punisher, which I didn't. There's a song Punisher on the album, and it's the name of the album as well. The Punisher song is about, basically, I think the song it's about her adoration and love for Elliott Smith, who obviously she never met because he passed away tragically 20 years ago at this point.
Yes,
he is also an emotional force of a singer-songwriter. Needle in the hay, I fall apart when I hear it to this day, and not just because of the scene in Royal Tenenbaums said it's over, which is always tough to watch. Anyway, so she writes a song Punisher because it's basically like her wanting like what she would say to him, what she would to this person who influenced her so much. And a Punisher is anybody who's a normie like us, a mortal, what's the word I'm looking for? A muggle in the music world. We're just fans, but we want to go talk to the musicians and talk to them and bother them with our questions and our thoughts and our expression of like how gratitude. When you go to a band member and you just have those conversations, you are a Punisher. You have crossed the line, and it's fine. It doesn't have to be like a bad thing, but it's just like you don't need to talk to them. They don't owe you anything. It's
no,
the relationship between you and the music is not you and the artist.
See, this is like going back to what I said before about from St. Jimmy James. He was saying the same thing. It's about, we put stock in these songs, man. We sit with them for years. Yeah,
and so I learned that in my past I used to be a bit of a Punisher just because like that was the scene. It felt like the bands were accessible, so I could talk to them. But so I apologize to the bands out there. I apologize to Mark Hoppus. Not really, but I punished him. I punished him once. But my punishing of Mark Hoppus was a perfect one because it was at the premiere of the Descendants documentary, and he was moderating with the directors at the end, the Q&A.
Yeah.
And the reason why I got into the Descendants was literally because Blink-182 covered Hope, one of my favorite songs of all time. I have to take your pants off and jacket tour. There's another throw of that word line in there for you. I know you like that. And
I do.
And that's what I punished Mark with. I just said I think it's great that you're here doing this because for me, you're the reason why I found the Descendants and literally this. And I like to think that I didn't punish him too hard.
Well, that was like, now I'm thinking about it. That was like when I ran into Matt Skiba at one of the shows. Like I forget who was playing. I think probably Take It Back Sunday was playing. I think it's that show. He was playing, and I look over to my left, and there's Skiba holding a bottle of wine. And I looked at him, and I said, I'm a big fan of big fan of your music. And he like nodded at me and then like chugged from the wine. And then he held the bottle for me. And I was like, fucking right, I'm doing this. Who cares? It's, yeah, I'm going to share a bottle with Skiba for a hot second. And then I did. And then he left.
That's great. I love that. I'm gonna share a story as well where Alkaline Trio led to me getting a free drink. Um, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we get
Yeah.
the episodes. Obviously, emo night started happening about 8 years ago,
Yeah.
and it became a sensation here in LA and around the country, around the world. I mean, it's incredible. There was an early emo night where I was wearing a crown because I was king of emo night. It's a whole thing. We'll get into it one day. And I was in the front of the stage, and the DJs were the guys from Joyce Manor, and
Oh,
they
okay.
started playing a deep cut Alkaline Trio song, and I knew every word, and I was jumping up and down.
Well,
and
what song? Do you remember what song?
I do, but I have to look it up because I'm blanking in the moment. So I'll just say, like, I was so excited. I was jumping up and down because it was a deep cut, as I just said, and I'm continuing to try to stop because it was Goodbye Forever. That's where it is.
Okay,
An
there it
amazing
is.
song.
Great song.
So I'm going crazy. Got my crown on. I have a big beard at the time. It's a whole thing. And the Barry, I believe his name is the lead singer of Joyce Manor, had a giant beer in his hand. He saw me singing. He walked up to the stage and poured the beer in my mouth. So that happened.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to keep to the theme. Alkaline Trio. I'm going to give you my next song.
All right.
My next
song or
song.
album?
Album. I'm sorry. We're going album. And it's a spoiler alert. It's Maybe I'll Catch Fire. The whole album.
Wow. I am impressed. I think Maybe I'll Catch Fire as the Alkaline Trio album Bring With You is an interesting choice. It's not the one I would go with.
It's not. What would you go with?
Good Morning.
It was a Good Morning. Yeah, I was on the fence. I ran back and forth with the two. I really did, because I was like, man, I mean, the whole album, both of them, there's not a bad song in either one of these albums. I went with Maybe I'll Catch Fire because, well, one, the title track's astonishingly good song. But from there, I think he gets really personal. Like, I feel like if you're gonna call a song "Fuck You, Aurora," it's a personal song, right? I mean, to write "Fuck You" in a title, that must mean something. But then you also get into like the Sleepyhead. You get into the number sequence. I can't remember the number sequence. 9-2, 10-9, 4-5, whatever it is. There was that one. You've Got So Far to Go with Dan singing. I mean, that's such a I love that song. Heartful song. Keep 'Em Coming. It's just everything on that is great. And I came to that album before I came to Good Morning, so it kind of holds a little more of a special spot for me. So really, it's a timing question for that. Why I chose one over the other.
Interesting. That's cool. I mean, maybe I'm gonna listen. Maybe I'll Catch Fire later today because I haven't listened to that album in a while.
Good album. Good album. Madam Me, the front. I mean, it's just fantastic.
And of course, Radio at the end, which is
Radio within. It's the way to end. It's like, how else do you? That's how you end an album.
Yeah, the most beautiful song with the lyrics: "A dog shit and razor blades."
It's so poetic, but like, honestly, what an image.
Yeah, no, it gets you.
It gets you every time, man.
All right. Well, I'm gonna stay in Chicago for my next one, because there's a little band named Fall Out Boy from Chicago.
I was wondering.
And I'm gonna go with Under the Cork Tree. I don't know, this album, since the day it came out to now, still is one I can just sit through every day. It's Fall Out Boy is they almost made my Rushmore list as well, because again, I think they take emo punk to a whole nother level, because they really take the stuff that like Taking Back Sunday was kind of doing, and they have the same kind of roots where a lot of them were in hardcore bands, and they put together this pop punk band, which a lot of people did at the time.
A lot of them did, yeah.
But they just had that secret sauce, and I think it ultimately comes down to the musicianship, and you also have songwriters, I believe, in Patrick Stump and Pete Wentz. They're kind of working together, and Under the Cork Tree to me was when emo really became like as mainstream as it ever got. Like it is like Sugar We're Going Down Swinging is such a perfect song. It rocks. It's awesome, and that was like the first single from that, and then Dance Dance, and then it's just it does everything.
It's got that. What's it? And the song with Chad from Newfound Glory is on there, where he's like starting to scream. He's like screaming again, like Baggies and Shia LaLue. That's 16, Little Less 16 Candles. I think
Yep.
that's that one. Yeah. It's like that. It's a good album. Good
Well,
album.
you got the screams. I'm a big sucker for I've Got a Dark Alley and a Bad Idea.
Okay.
That song, it just hit really hard. It's like their sad, ballad about like not feeling like you belong in the world, and it hits me hard. I didn't think it's a perfect album. I also have a funny story where like there was once I drove from Strong Island to Boston, had been kind of sort of dating this girl, and I went with this guy on a road trip to Boston. We all went, and like as soon as we got there, I was no longer dating the girl, and then we had to drive back. And I remember no one wanted to talk to each other. It was all for the best, of course. But we're in the car, and no one wanted everyone, and also the guy who went up there with her friend he wanted to date her, but she didn't want to date him. Anyway, everyone's really really emo the way back, and I was just annoyed that I had to drive everybody because for some reason I was driving. So I looked in the car, and the only CD in the car at the time was Under the Cork Tree. So I just put it in when we started driving Boston, and I just kept repeating it the entire trip. And I don't regret a minute of that. I had a great time.
That's a big story to unpack in a very short amount of time.
We don't have time to unpack it right now.
No, we don't. We don't. I'm not going to get into that. No, that's okay. That's a lot. I'm going to use this as a transition. Speaking of a big story, I'm going to do the first one out of these albums. It's going to be out there. Okay, it's the first one. We're gonna branch off somewhere very well. It's the second one because you also went with Punisher. I'm going to bring in a soundtrack.
What?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a soundtrack.
Can we do that?
We're doing it. I'm doing it because I don't care. That's how punk rock I am. I'm doing it. I'm doing it to what I feel is a very punk rock musical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with the original Broadway recording of Rent.
I love this for you, and I'm so jealous I didn't think of it.
I've always loved musicals. I'm a child who grew up watching musicals for whatever reason. I don't know why, but like I feel like I'm not shitting you. I feel like every Saturday I was watching either My Fair Lady or West Side Story at one point. I don't know why. Just maybe there's a vibe or a scene. I don't know. So I've always had a thing for musicals. Going back to Miss Smith, she really helped me bring into that. We had a class with her about film history. She brought in the concept of musicals as a film genre, and she showed us Rocky Horror, and which was like high school. I was like, what the fuck is this movie? Like, and then I was like, okay, so I've learned, and I see a direct connection between these things in punk rock and emo is inclusivity, right? Oh, be okay to be weird and be different. Totally cool. But for me, Rent in its entirety, that is such a punk rock play. It's not even funny how much of a punk rock play or musical that is. The songs in it, the characters in it, the just general vibe. Well, the fact that you use the word rent, I mean, as an allegory, metaphor, that's a better word, as a metaphor, because you can rent is what we pay, right? We all pay rent. We all have to pay kind of a tax to live somewhere. But there's also the other meaning of rent is to be rented, is to be ripped apart. And I've always found that musical to summarize those two kind of feelings and just this overall feeling of being an artist on your own, DIY, fuck you, I say it's art because it's art, like that kind of this mentality where we are a community. Again, I'm big on it's community, not competition, guys. That this is a musical about community. So that's why it's on there. And I can sing every song on it.
Well, I think it's fantastic. I don't know if I only saw Rent for the first time 3 years ago. I finally went because they were touring it over and over again for the anniversaries and everything. And I finally went, and I loved American Idiot on Broadway, but I had no idea where kind of like the inspiration came from. And then I saw Rent, and I'm like, oh, I see. But I loved it. I never really listened to this. I'm with shows. I often don't listen to the soundtrack until I see the show. I want to be fresh. But then I realized with Rent, like it was to my detriment because it was a concert because people have been watching that play for musical for 20 years. Everyone knew every word. They were all Rent heads. It was amazing. I love it. My alarm to wake up in the morning is a from Rent. Actually, it's a No Day But Today. comes on. It's kind
I
of
mean,
a get me going in the day.
it's just one of those it does. It gets you going on the day, or their I think what sold it for me was the melancholic oh early in one song, Glory. So that with Roger, I think it is. Yeah, he's singing it. And it's like this, taking a moment to look back on your life and just being like, because we're all facing AIDS, and it just, I don't know, it was like there's such a awareness in that play or musical the entire way that I don't think you can beat it. And I still to this day it's my favorite musical of all. So hence why the Rent soundtrack will be with me on my deserted island.
Well, that's wonderful on these deserted islands, possibly in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know. You might have to take a transatlantic flight to get there for my next album, Transatlanticism by Death Cab for Cutie.
There you go.
That
was a good segue. I like it.
Do you? I don't know if it's good. I'll tell you what though, that album, which came out 20 years ago this year, along with the Postal Service, and they're doing a giant tour where they're doing both albums. Postal Service is playing Give Up, and then Death Cab will play all Transatlanticism. It is, I don't know if Death Cab was considered emo at the time or indie rock at the time, but like they talk about poetic imagery and storytelling. Ben Gibbard's lyrics have always just been so rich. It felt like you're reading novels and short stories when you hear those songs. Tiny Vessels, to me, into Transatlanticism, like that is just feelings upon feelings. I could not live without this album, so that's why it's there.
You want to play anything off of it?
Yeah, let's play Tiny Vessels.
Okay, let's go with it. For the folks at home on Spotify, here's Tiny Vessels.
Oh yeah, that one always gets me. All right, back on track here.
All right. I think I am up. And I stray one or two more times out of this thing. I'm gonna stray again. Quick background. Also a fan of metal. Always kind of had a connection.
Like aluminum and
no, like heavy metal. Well,
okay.
Aluminum's a rather light metal anyway. But it was probably one of my early adoptions, mostly because of my sisters. So I got into metal very early in life, probably earlier than I ought to, but here we are. For me, out of the scene of that 80s thrash metal, there was one that really I kind of connected with because I felt it was something different about them. And the band, in the lead singer and guitarist of the band even referred to themselves once when asked them what they were. And it was essentially that they were a jazz influenced punk band. But they played metal. And that would be Megadeth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Specifically, I just feel if you're gonna go into the thrash metal, go with Megadeth. I'll just add it right out of the gate. And if you're going to get it, to go listen to it, get the live album. Live album that one night. It's a concert they did in Buenos Aires. It's the best songs by them, but what really sells me on this album is not even the band, it's the audience. You actually can literally hear the audience singing guitar intros and like singing the solos and the guitar work. It's astonishing to listen to, but you can, if you put that on, if folks at home, you want to do it, put on the Tornado of Souls, the way that you can hear the audience singing the parts of the guitar work. I mean, it's an astonishing album. Great album. Also, if you like vinyl, there's a fantastic version out there. It's 4-disc. It's like purple and crackly looking. Very expensive. Not for me, but looks really nice.
Well, Phil, I'm glad you took us into the metal, thrash metal, speed metal. I don't know, I guess Megadeth is kind of
they're one of the big four. I go back to Big Four, one of the big four of thrash metal.
Yeah, so I'm glad we're there because I'm going to not go metal, but I'm going to go industrial.
Oh,
with the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails.
That's fantastic.
This album is perfect. It is upsetting and bleak and angsty and beautiful at the same time.
I was just gonna say that it's such a bleak feel to it. even the title, man, it's downward spot. We're just, and it doesn't end. That's the scary thing about that title, is that it
Well,
doesn't
it's an
end.
onslaught of this dark emotions. The shadow self is just on display here in this
Yeah.
song, and I mean, this album is, I believe, going to be 29 years old this next month, and by soon enough it'll be the 30th anniversary. And Nine Inch Nails is one of the greatest bands I've ever seen live.
Yeah.
I wasn't even a big fan of them. I just knew them because they were Nine Inch Nails, and you just know who Nine Inch Nails are.
Mm.
And I went to see them, I think, for the With Teeth tour, and I just sat there and like was melted into my seat of the awesomeness. They are just Trent Reznor is just everything you think he's going to be live. I actually got to see him a couple times this year as well, and he is so in it. He is feeling you feel him feeling every emotion while he's singing and screaming and just hitting you with all this. Yeah,
Nine Inch Nails, emo before emo was a thing.
it is, and that's the thing I like.
Mm-hmm.
I've come around to, because over the years I became more and more of a Nine Inch Nails fan, to where now they're one of my favorite bands of all time, and I'm like, man, this is you hit it. This is emo as hell.
I mean, just wait. I'm gonna go. We'll go back one other album, Pretty Hate Machine, and just him doing "Hurt." My goodness, what an emo song that is!
Well, that's the thing. I mean, her ends Downward Spiral, and it's like you go through this
Yeah.
intense journey, and then the last song is just this haunting, beautiful little song. And I don't, not little. It's amazing. So that's why Downward Spiral is with me.
Downward Spiral, it is. Yep. All right, so you're gonna go. We went there. I have now hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've hit 5. I'm halfway through the list.
We got to keep going, because the waitress over there is giving her the evil eye, because
I know
done nothing but fill up our coffee this whole time.
Yeah, I know. She's looking at us kind of. I know she's looking at us odd. I'm gonna go. Let's do another hot take. I love hot takes. I'm gonna pick Misfits album.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, but you're not gonna like the one I'm picking. I'm picking Famous Monsters.
What?
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Okay, so not the original Misfits.
No, not the original Misfits.
okay.
No, no. If I'm gonna bring one, it's funny. I think on the albums, I love all the albums. I listen to them. Even the short ones like Brutality, which is like 15 minutes or it feels like 15 seconds. But for whatever reason, I have this weird nostalgic connection with Famous Monsters. I think it's because when it came out, I was getting more into movies, particularly sci-fi movies. And this whole album is just sci-fi fantasy songs about those kinds of movies. And I think there's just this odd connection I have with it. Yeah, I tell you, it's not even their best. Not even close to their best. Mostly because Danzig's not even in it.
Right. Well,
yeah, I know. Hot take. Famous Monsters.
This is a good moment to be like, another thing about liking this music, and we sat through it growing up in it, and like the whole sellout era, and people being like, oh, you like that band? That band's a boy band, things like that. Like all the things that people would say when they judged you by the bands you like. I don't believe in guilty pleasures, Phil. I believe that this life on this planet can be hard at times. If anything gives you pleasure, then it's worth celebrating, and that is why we are celebrating all the music we love, no matter which Misfits album you pick for the island. That's fine. You should be proud of that.
I am. I'm gonna be proud of it. I'm gonna tell you right now, Scream's a great song. People they're gonna say no, but it is. It's a great song. It's got it's got everything in it. It's got everything you want. But
Pepper is telling me to go on to the next one. I will take a band that once covered Halloween by the Misfits on one of their EPs, but then in 2003 they had their major label debut again 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
And they wrote this album called Sing the Sorrow, which to me is it's what the band was always building towards their entire time. Like, this is a band that people say, like, they used to be like a hardcore punk band, they were a hardcore band, then they were a goth punk band, then they were all these things, but then Sing the Sorrow, it really to me was like where they were headed all along.
Yeah.
And this is AFI Sing the Sorrow. I absolutely love this album. It's dense in lyrics and feeling and darkness and emotions, and it rocks.
Have we played a song recently? I feel like we haven't.
We haven't.
All right, Girls Not Great. Let's go.
All right, here we go. And there's Girls Not Grey. Ah, what a
Telling
perfect
you,
song.
man. I just follow. I just the whole part. It's just so great. Did you tell me you saw them once and like he lit himself on fire?
No, that definitely didn't happen. I will say that what he does do is he walks on the crowd.
Oh,
And he's been doing that. He was doing that 20 years ago, and I saw him recently, and they were still doing it. So, still one of the greatest frontman performances I've ever seen. Jumping, standing on crowds, it's incredible.
incredible.
And they are playing in 2 weeks at the Forum here in LA for the literal 20th anniversary of the day the album came out. They've decided to do the nostalgia show, play the album in its entirety, which I've never done before. But instead of doing a tour, they just said we're going to do in the Forum in LA. So all the AFI fans from around the world are coming together. So I think that this is going to be the AFI fan convention along with the celebration of the album that kind of really, really changed their career.
That reminds me, the way you just explained that reminds me of the time we saw Green Day, the free show, where you had to wait in line at what was it, Tower Records? Yeah, had to wait in line for Tower Records to get the free tickets. They didn't go on sale till midnight. We have eventually folks on Real regale you with stories about that adventure. That was a funny one. But it was like when we got to the show, it was just Green Day. There was no opening act. But it felt like the vibe at the audience. We were all immense Green Day fans. Because in order to get those tickets, you had to wait patiently. I think so. I'm kind of happy that you're going to go to that because I feel like that's a convergence of all those. There's no AFI. Is there like a name for AFI fans?
The fan club is called the Despair Faction, Bill.
Oh, all right.
And I'm a proud member. That's how I actually got my tickets because I got to do the early sale.
It's like they're taking it from the Misfits with the Fiend Club. So there you go. I get you.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. We're coming around the bend here.
We're coming around the bend. I got 4 left. I've enjoyed kind of going down weird tangents for a bit, so I'm gonna keep going.
Great.
Gonna keep going. Told you I like metal, right? But I'm gonna go on the other end of the spectrum this time with metal. We're gonna go to prog rock. Yes,
prog
sir.
Rock.
Prog rock. We're gonna
Not music from Prague.
No, PROG.
Yeah.
Rock, right? Prague. We're not from Prague, although I've heard Prague. And I'm sure music is good from Prague.
I'm sure. Progressive rock you're talking about, though.
I'm talking about progressive rock. I'm gonna go to our neighbors to the north. I'm gonna go to Canada, the Holy Trinity that is Rush.
Wow.
And we're gonna talk about 2112.
Wow. I did not expect Rush to make it here, but here we are.
Oh, but here we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil is now saying Rush is an emo band. So
they're an emo band.
Send your angry letters to Phil.
Bring it on. It's you can catch me. Yes, hit me up. I'm gonna go with Rush is actually an emo band. They are. Talk about emotion, right? Look at 2112 specifically. The first half of the album is a story of a totalitarian society who have outlawed music. And this one guy finds a guitar. And what does he do with it? He starts to make music for it. And he brings it to the people. He's like, hey, I can make music and people can enjoy this. And the totalitarians were like, nope, can't have that happen. That's emo as fuck, man.
Sure is.
Sure is, right?
I know Coheed and Cambria would agree with you,
Yes, they would. Yeah, they would, exactly. And so I think that's where this also goes, is that with Rush, particularly with this album, and specific with 2112, is a sci-fi element to it, right? As we talked about, a lot of us nerds, we like our sci-fi things, and this, like you said, with Coheed, that album made and influenced other bands in the genre.
That's awesome.
I'm sticking to my guns. 2112, it's an emo album.
No, I love that. And speaking of influences, I at one point on this list, I had the Disintegration by The Cure, which I do love that album, and I would really like to have it with me on the deserted island.
Yeah.
But I decided to kind of steer back into kind of the more, The Cure is a band that I found later who they weren't happening when I was in music. They were like they were an oldie band to me in that sense. But I'm very happy to say I've seen The Cure and it's great. But Robert Smith appears on a Blink-182 album.
Does he really?
In 2003's untitled Blink-182 record, which I think is really their masterpiece. I think I would bring it with me because I don't know if I could go with my life without hearing "Where are you?" whenever I needed it. So Robert Smith's on the track called All This. It's amazing because it's him singing, and the album is, it. I feel like the album really focuses on and highlights Travis Barker's drumming throughout the songs. They're a little more progressive than their normal pop punk songs, but I think that this was like much like how I think Sing the Sorrow is like the album AFI was always building to make. I think this is the Blink-182 album the same way. This is the one that like all the pieces came together and make this. It's their probably most mature songwriting across the board. And it's also an album that came out in 2003. So this is when we'll also be celebrating 20th anniversary. So that's coming with me.
You know what I have found very funny? Well, just thinking about this. Hearing your top 10, my top 10. I go with a lot of older stuff, and you're much more recent than I am. It's very funny to think about that.
It's not that recent, Bill.
No,
20 plus years.
But I just pushed out 2112, dude. That's from like 1975-ish or so.
That's a good point. I did, and I got a couple more here that are gonna flip your hat off your head if you were wearing one.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna stick to the 70s. I'm gonna go with my favorite album by one of my favorite writers, lyricists altogether. You're very aware of who this person is. I mean, great growing up on Long Island. He grew up in Jersey. It's a great connection between the two. We're talking about Bruce Springsteen. It's one of the, I just always been a connection with Bruce. And if I was going to, I was actually, like if I really had to come down, like Bruce has got a lot of good stuff. I prefer his older stuff to more of his newer stuff. I like when he was more of a storyteller versus where he's gone more recently. But I was like, okay, what if I'm bringing one, which one from him would I do? And yeah, the easy one out of the gate, Born to Run, right? That's super simple. I'm like, you know what? It's not, because to me, I don't connect with it as much as I do. I gotta say, it's a Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? Post wet, just I believe at this point he's divorced, and he's putting everything, all that anger. It's the first angry, like real angry Bruce Springsteen album. Which connects to a lot of it. He's a lyricist, right? We talked about numerous times during this whole episode that with emo, there is a lyricist quality to it. Taking a look at yourself, putting that into words, and being angry. It's okay to be angry, sad, happy, feel joy and all that. But Bruce puts all of that into this album. I mean, just even the way it starts with the drums coming into Badlands right at the front, and it goes right into probably Bruce's angriest song ever, which is Adam Race Cain. From there, I forget what happens after that. We get into, okay, I had to look it up. We get into more of the romantic stuff with, Something at Night, Kane's Room, Racing in the Street, kind of like a throwback episode, but it all leads up to this, the title track of the album, Darkness on the Edge of Town. And it's just, I'm easily found on the Darkness on the Edge of Town. Man, it's just such a dark, complex thought. So yes, I'm going to bring Darkness on the Edge of Town with me.
I love this. I love Darkness on the Edge of Town is a punk emo Bruce Springsteen album.
Oh, 100%.
In its ethos, in its tone,
just
its
even
spirit.
The spirit and the if you look at the beats per minute for that, the rhythm of that, they are not slow songs. Those are fast songs. You could probably interlay a Ramones beat right on top of it, and you still get the same result.
Wasn't he wearing the white shirt and the leather jacket at the time too?
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
yes,
so there it is.
Yeah.
It's all right there.
This is like when he started. They were starting to make him to a sex symbol.
Well, I could say this. This transition to the next one on my list. I am not the first person to think this, but Bruce Springsteen. I often wonder who's the Bruce Springsteen of modern pop music, and who is the storyteller who takes you into these different worlds and makes you have a feeling on the characters and the songs. And I believe there is a connection, and I'm not alone. I've seen other people say the same thing, even though it may shock you to hear this, Phil, you in particular. But
I've thrown down some crazy ones, so let me hear it.
The millennial Bruce Springsteen is Taylor Swift.
Not where I thought this was going to go.
I know it wasn't, but hear me out. If you look at her, look at how she tells these stories and creates these characters. That's what Bruce does.
No, you're not wrong.
And Bruce is one of the most popular artists of all time. Taylor Swift has broken Ticketmaster, and she's a fantastic songwriter. Again, coming back to, in a lot of ways, the simplicity of it, and also how she's evolved as a songwriter. Her last few albums, I think, are some of her best albums. She's only getting better as she goes.
I got to be honest with you. I may have migrated to T Swift land because of the later albums.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, these are good. Like these are like they're good. They're right. I'm telling you right now, Anti-Hero is probably my favorite song by her. That song is nuts. The song is nuts.
And and obviously, like I can only take one Taylor Swift record with me. Is the situation here,
right? So
and I love Midnights. I love folklore. Folklore to me blew my mind. I love that album so much. But I'm gonna bring Red, Taylor's version specifically, because there's so many songs on it. First of all, I might as well get the most bang for my buck. When she went, obviously, what's so cool about, I think that what she's done is, obviously her masters are owned by someone else who sold them, and it's a whole bullshit thing. So she just said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna re-record all my old albums, call them Taylor's version, make them better, and that's gonna become and I own them all. So that's what she's been doing. Taylor's version of Red was the last one she did. She also does this thing where she pulls out songs from the vault that she never finished, that she finishes for the albums. You get even more. But on this one in particular, you get All Too Well 10-minute version, which is the breakup song of breakup songs. It is one of the most epic songs. It's one of her best songs already, but now she expands it. It's the Lord of the Rings extended edition of All Too Well. And, a 10-minute song like that would really help on the deserted island, because I'm knocking out 10 minutes at a time. I listen to it, and you know what? I never get tired of it. So Red is coming.
I wonder what a Taylor Swift musical look like.
I don't know, but I want front row seats.
I think I do too. I feel like it's either Taylor Swift or like an Alkaline Trio. I've always wanted to do an Alkaline Trio musical.
Maybe you
imagine.
Yeah.
Maybe. Trying to think what I would start with. Okay, you had mentioned about getting more bang for your buck, right? So let's go back. So I'm gonna go bring it back. Really bring it back to the punk world, because punk albums are great for that, man. 18 songs, right? You get a lot of bang for your buck. I had mentioned this earlier. I'm gonna go to Bad Religion this time. I mentioned that was the band. That was the band that that really kind of solidified it for me, right? Green Day got me there, but then Bad Religion was the first one where I was like, yes. What I always identify with Bad Religion is they take that external lens, right? And they look at things. Now, at the time frame, let me back that up. A lot of the Bad Religion songs deal with questioning religion. And at the time frame, that was kind of where I was growing up a certain way. And then you were like, I don't know if I really feel like this. But so there was a band, they started looking at it from a different lens. Now, there have been a great amount of Bad Religion albums, and so then from there, but you have to go back. I mean, what's the Bad Religion's greatest album? Is Suffer. Bad Religion's greatest album is Suffer. There's no doubt about that, but I'm not going to talk about that. I am going to talk about Stranger Than Fiction.
Excellent.
This was the 15 tracks on it, so you get your bang for your buck. But 2, that's their big hit with Infected, but that wasn't really why I liked it. I liked it because it opens up with a song called Incomplete, and I feel like that's how I felt at the time, and this is a natural connection between the two. So we're going with Stranger Than Fiction.
Fantastic. Is there a song you would like to hear off that right now?
There is. Let's do The Handshake.
The Handshake. This is The Handshake by Bad Religion.
Well, that was The Handshake by Bad Religion, one of your great songs. It just had all the different ways you can interpret a handshake.
That's
Jeff,
fantastic.
I've got one left. I'm saving mine. You have 2 left. Let's do yours. What are we doing?
Yeah, well, you've been pulling from your Mount Rushmore, so I think I'm gonna pull from mine for this one. And I'm going 3 Cheers with Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance. Good album, a perfect album. I feel like every time I listen to this album, it feels like the first time. I don't know what it is about it. It's the production, it's the ferociousness of it at times. It's the world building. It's all the stuff that I love about My Chemical Romance, but just a little bit more like dirty rock and roll of it. It's it's got such a feeling. It's got such a uh all over the place kind of like epicness to it, even though it's like a smaller album than Black Parade, but it's still just you know, it just
It
rocks.
feels like controlled chaos. That whole album just feels like at any second it's about to explode, but then but like in a yes, but it's always controlled. Like it's always like it's just still going forward. Solid the entire way. No, I don't think there's a bad song on that album.
Well, there isn't, and I think in particular, I've always thought this: if you were to listen to a record and look at A sides and B sides, I do believe the second half of this album is relentlessly, perfectly awesome. It literally, you go to interlude. Let's start with interlude. That's halfway
Yeah, okay.
through.
Okay.
You come into Thank You for the Venom, into Hang 'em High, your gunslinging Western punk rock.
I've always liked that song because the way it opens with the whistle, kind of like the whistling kind of sound to it. And I'm like, are we like going on horses right now?
That's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
It's not a fast statement. It's a fucking Death Wish, one of my favorite My Chemical Romance songs. Again,
yeah.
just oh my god, the angst, the energy, the feeling. Into Cemetery Drive, into I Never Told You I Do It for a Living to close the record out. Like, I mean, that second half of that album is perfect. I also when I was working at Borders once, Borders Books and Music, and I was in the inventory section in the back where I could listen to any music I wanted. And sometimes I would just listen to that album for 8 hours straight. So that seems to be a tendency of mine to do that. So, you know, you can unpack that later too.
I didn't last long at Borders. So I was working at the register and did I get fired? I think I got fired. I went out strong because I was at I'm working the cash register, and a guy comes over and he asks the question. He goes, do you know where the self-help section is? And I said, yeah. But if I told you that, wouldn't that defeat the purpose?
There you go. There you go.
Oh, he then asked for my manager. I said, sure, I'll go get him.
I think the right person would have thought that was really funny. You just got the wrong person.
I got the wrong person because honestly, I think that joke lands pretty well for everybody but that one guy. I have to go back to the big four, which the last one is Green Day. And I was on the fence. For a while. I have notes. I rewrote 3 times which album I wanted to bring. And it finally was like, you know what? What's the one I could just always throw on? I'm never going to think twice about it. And that is Kerplunk.
Wow. Okay.
We're going way all the way back to the beginning. But the extended version, of course, with the extra songs on it. But it's such a different. It's funny to listen to that song, to that album, because it's Green Day very smartly writing songs that are love songs. Like these are songs the Descendants probably could have wrote, right? Or the Ramones could have wrote, because those are the bands talked about being in relationships. And it's funny particularly with Kerplunk against Dookie, because I feel like they're very different albums, like very different,
definitely.
almost-ish written by different bands kind of thing. Like it was an interesting thing. And I know Billy's talked about that a lot of Dookie was stuff they wrote over the years, and they kind of like put it together like that versus a more concise thing. But if we're going to do a solid album, all bangers, nothing bad ever, I got to go with Kerplunk. I have to. It's just that, particularly because it was the first time they came. Well, one, it's where Welcome to Paradise first appeared, and I think it's the better. And I think it's the better version than on Dookie. But two, he talked about Holden Caulfield. Right. Yep. And at the point, I'm like, who's talking about character on the ride? Like, who does that? Like, lyrical, a book about, or a song about a book has always kind of intrigued me whenever they can do that. But then adding a very early song with Christy Road, as early as it is, I've always like, if they went and put that in the third, fourth slot, then what else is going to be on this album? And I think it just shows you all the different things, what Green Day can be, because you've got Dominator Love Slaves, you got the funny, weird stuff that they can do, and they still do. They've had songs like that. You've had, look at that. That's a precursor to like King for a Day, isn't it? We're like talking about different things like that.
Yeah, so, I think Kirsty Road, I think, also is the one that most highlights what they're going to become. You can hear where they're going to go over the course of their career, because this is before they blew up. Like this is before
Right.
Dookies, so this is where they were like really big on the indie scene, and like they were like a huge band. People loved them, going to their shows, and then it's what got them to the major label, and it's what got them to be one of the
It's
biggest bands of the world.
what it just you can hear why on that album, particularly that album, you can hear why they're as big as they are. Because you can hear it in those songs, the way they crafted those songs. Yeah, they're punk songs. They're 3, 4, 5 chords, but it's the songwriting that you can see. Like you're right with Christy Road. That's a big song. That's a big song, and I think you're right. A precursor to where they go.
Bill, I know we're almost done, but can we listen to 2,000 Light Years Away?
We sure can.
Fantastic. Here is 2,000 Light Years Away off Green Day's Kerplunk.
That was 2,000 Light Years Away. I just learned something, that Jesse Michaels was one of the writers of that song.
Well, there you go. Op Ivy.
Op Ivy, man. I didn't know that. Now I know.
Apparently,
Now
Green Day's first show was Op Ivy's last show. So, you know.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. What that would have been an amazing show.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
You know, in my head now, who opened for them is Jawbreaker, because you got to keep all the Oakland bands together, right? So
They're all there. Yeah, it's all.
What a crazy show that would have been. Still in the boat. I got to admit, Op Ivy. I'm like, I kind of don't want you guys to get back together, because I don't want to see it. But at the same time, like, I kind of would pay anything to see Op Ivy play.
Well, you know, I think they were like teenagers when that band broke up, so it's interesting to think of. You know, I'm sure they're close to 50 now. So
yeah,
but you know, I'm just glad Op Ivy exists. That's all I'll say that.
Yeah,
and if we get to see them again, that's cool. If not, you know, I'm just glad they're there. And you know, Green Day always covers an Op Ivy song in their shows, so
that's true. No, that's true. But it's just, I don't know, man. Just put on energy, and that's an album you just bounce to, man. Oof. Now I'm like, I should have had that on here. Maybe I should have had it on here.
Oh, who knows? Maybe we'll be doing an Op Ivy episode not too
far from now. All right, you're down to you've done 9. So
yeah. There is a band, I believe they're from Pennsylvania. They kind of write about Philadelphia like it's other bands will use other cities, like Philadelphia is the character in their story oftentimes. They also go to Asbury, and they also have that Springsteen influence. They had that Americana pop punk. The band, the Menzingers. I just adore this band. They have many albums that are incredible. On the Impossible Past was one I was thinking about, because I just absolutely love that. Talk about songs that take place in diners, you know.
Yeah.
You know, waitress the diner who smokes the same brand of cigarettes. You know, that's the kind of lyrics they have. I saw a meme, I believe it was from Hard Times, that basically said like a 19-year-old Menzinger fan feeling nostalgic for his 20s. You know, because that's what the Menzingers feel like. I chose After the Party. It's their 2017 album.
Again, a newer one. There you go.
Yeah, that's exciting to me. It's exciting to me that I'm still, you know, over the years been finding new artists who hit me the same way. And
I appreciate that. No, I get you with that.
It's just, you know, it's their brand. They I'm sure if there's a Venn diagram, I'm sure there's a Venn diagram for you, Phil. They share things like Gaslight Anthem, but they share things of Bouncing Souls. They just had that punk ethos, but they're folky punk at times. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It makes me feel like I know the setting of these stories, and I feel it very deeply emotionally. For me, the song After the Party, which the album is named after, you know, it's a song about the scene. It's a song about, like, you know, there's lyrics in there about, like, you know, everybody wants to be famous, but you just want to dance in a basement. And to me, that is the punk ethos, that the person who doesn't care about their band becoming huge or the bands they love becoming huge, they just want to go to shows in the basement in their hometown. At least that's how I feel about it. And, you know, After the Party, it's me and you. Just this idea of, like, what does it mean after the party? Like, does this moment of youth end, and what happens then? Or do we get to continue listening to this kind of music for the rest of our lives, which is what we're proving is true. The party actually never ends. So that is why I need this album, After the Party.
It only ends if you allow it to. Like I like you were saying, I'm still picking up new bands, which is great. I mean, it just shows you, well, one, it shows you the longevity of the genre itself. that other kids are, because what does this mean? New people are finding it. They're finding the albums that we listen to, or finding new albums that they're going to listen to, and they're going to become songwriters and write songs
Hmm.
and go do shows, and then hopefully inspire the next wave. Right? It's wave begets wave begets wave. It's an ever exploring thing. Well, that's the uniqueness of punk, I think, because so many different sounds can do it. Like I came across Pup. I'm like, Pup the band, you're my new friend, right? I'm gonna hang out with you for a little while. It's just, and it's one of those bands. I don't really get it, but I love it. You know?
Yeah, I mean that's if it hits that feeling, it's good, and it
Yeah.
still hits that, and that's why I'm excited about new bands as well, and I'm excited to go to these shows and see these now, people going to these shows who are so much younger now, and they're just going to see these bands for the first time. They love them just as much, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so that's our lists. I think I'd like to play After the Party at the end of this podcast, which I think we're at the end, actually, the first
We're at the
0
end, right?
episode.
No,
Yeah.
this is it. Yeah.
So I guess it's gonna be a lot. This is just to kind of get started, get our feet wet, talk about a bunch of bands, play a lot of different songs. But week to week we are going to be focusing on one album,
Right.
and we're excited to share those with you.
Now and again, we'll have a special guest, someone who's going to talk about this particular album. But we're going to stick to an album at a time. So before we play out with the song, let's end with that. Remember to check us out on YouTube at Millennial Diner Podcast, as well as on Instagram, Millennial Millennial Diner Podcast on Instagram, and also here on Spotify.
Yep, and we have to pay at the register, I think, now that we're done with our diner experience this week. Looking forward to hanging out at the Millennial Diner again with you next time, Phil.
Me too. Look forward to it.
And until then, here is the Menzingers song, After the Party, and we'll see you soon, or hear you soon, podcasting.